Anytime you are animating, you should be using some sort of reference material. These can come in many forms, from watching live action, video references, or hand-drawn studies. To become highly skilled at creating walk cycles, you should take some time drawing out each pose for yourself, but that's a bit beyond the scope of the time that we have for this project. Luckily for us, there are hundreds of resources available for us to borrow from. In this video, I will show you how to take a pre-drawn reference and prepare it in Adobe Photoshop for use as reference material in Adobe Flash. Let's get started. To find a good walk cycle reference, I simply searched Google on walk cycle reference and came up with a ton of choices. The one I chose was this one here. It actually comes from a web article named 25 Best Walk Cycle Animation Videos and Keyframe Illustrations. This resource contains sketches of 9 poses that make up the walk cycle. I've placed this image on the IMD student server in the resources folder for this course for you to use. Open the file named onewalkcyclepreview.jpg in Adobe Photoshop. Our goal is to put each pose on its own layer and align all of them on top of each other, keeping the center of gravity and the floor plane the same for each pose. Now create a new Photoshop document according to the final product specifications. In this project, I have required you to use 720p 30 frames per second. Go to File, New, and then under Preset, choose Film and Video. Then we want to choose the HDV HDTV 720p 2997 preset and click on OK. Now we're going to drag a guide out of the vertical ruler with our Move tool, and it'll help us center the pose. If you have snapping turned on, it will snap right to the center of your canvas. Once you do this, you'll notice some other guides automatically appear. These are pre-made title safe and action safe guides. We'll simply use this pre-made title safe guide right here as our floor plane. Now we need to get the walk cycle reference into this target document. So I'm going to go back to the walk cycle reference image, and I'm going to drag and drop or copy and paste it into this document. As you can see, it's a little bit small for our needs. Now we're going to actually go ahead and break a rule, and we're going to enlarge this to make it as big as we need it. Now I know I've stressed over and over not to enlarge pixel-based images, but in this case, this is just a reference image and it won't be seen in our final product. So I don't mind enlarging it here. Next, we'll make a total of 9 copies of this layer, naming each of them specifically so that when we import them into Flash, we'll be able to easily understand which layer is which. Let's start by renaming layer 1 Pose 1 Contact. If I come over here, I can see this is the first pose. So now I'm going to duplicate this layer. I can do this many different ways. I can just right click on the layer name and choose Duplicate Layer, and then I can go ahead and rename this at this time if I want. So I'll go Pose 2 Recoil and click OK. And then I'm just simply going to repeat this process over and over until I have a layer for each pose. Now I have my 9 different poses. Now we're ready to position and mask each layer so that only one pose appears on each layer. Let's hide all the layers except for pose 1, and then let's move pose 1 over where we need it. Now I want to position this front foot right on the ground plane, and then as far as alignment goes, I'm going to put the center guide going right down through the middle of his neck, somewhere in there. Now let's add a layer mask. Now if you don't remember layer masks, you may need to refresh some of your Photoshop skills, but right now this mask is filled with white, and that means that we can see everything on that layer. And what I want to do is mask out all this stuff over here so that I only see the pose that I want. So I'm going to go to my polygon lasso tool. I'm just going to make a really rough, quick selection here. And I'm going to inverse my selection by going to Select, Inverse. So now I have the background selected. And I'm going to go to Edit, Fill, and use black, and click OK. Now I added that black to the mask, not to the layer itself. And you can see that everything else has been masked out, and I can see only the pose that I want on pose 1. So now I'm ready to work on pose 2. I'll show it after I deselect, show pose 2. Let's move pose 2, get a hold of the layer I want. Let's move it over here where we need it. Now, sometimes it's helpful to change the opacity down a little, and it'll help me see through pose 2 to where pose 1 is and help me align it. I'm happy with that, so I'll change the opacity back to 100. And now I'll just repeat that process. I'm going to add a layer mask, and with my polygon lasso tool, make a rough selection. Select Inverse, and Edit, Fill using black. Okay, now I'm just going to repeat that process until I have all of my layers masked so that only one pose is showing per layer. Now, once I get to pose 9, pose 1 and pose 9 need to be exactly the same. So instead of redoing that work and trying to line it up perfect, I'm just going to delete layer 9 here, and I'm going to go to pose 1 and duplicate that layer, and I'm going to call it pose 9, and just move that to the top of my stacking order. Now pose 1 and pose 9 are exactly the same. If you've not done so already, you should be saving your document as you work here. Now I'm going to call mine Decker Walk Cycle Reference, and then this one is now complete and ready to go. We're ready to import this in to Adobe Flash and set up our reference materials in there.